This is the Grief Talk Podcast with Vaughn Solis, helping you heal after loss and life's hardest hits. My guest today is Ellie Pechet, a metaphysician, medium, shaman, and author with a master's degree in counseling from Cambridge College. Starting out as a traditional talk therapy counselor, once Ellie began incorporating the healing modalities of Reiki, EMF, and the Yun method of healing early in her career, Ellie shifted her practice into a heightened intuitive counseling practice and developed the Pechet Healing Technique. Now, with over 33 years' experience, Ellie helps clients shift their energy to dissolve emotional and physical issues, including grief, PTSD, depression, anxiety, and chronic pain, so that they can find freedom from their pain and live their best life. Ellie is also the author of Hitching a Ride, a guide to earthbound spirits and how they affect you. So welcome, audience. Today we are speaking with Ellie Pechet, and as you know from the introduction to Ellie, Ellie is a metaphysician, she is a shaman, she is a medium, she is an author. We are going to be talking about how Ellie does pull grief and other types of toxic energy. I'll just use the word toxic energy from her clients, deals with all sorts of issues as an energy healer. I'm assuming that's as a shaman as well, Ellie, but you're gonna fill me in on the way as we go. And all in the vein of helping you become free from toxic emotions, energy, and on your way to the life you really want to live, which I am absolutely all about. And so, Ellie, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me on. It's really nice to finally meet you.
Yes, Ellie and I are quite connected on a number of different levels, and in terms of some things we love to do in our spare time, living by the ocean, water, things like that, both as energy healers and angels. So it's great to meet you, Ellie, and introduce you to my audience on my podcast. It's very cool. So we're going to be getting audience today. Ellie, you mentioned that you do have a specialty in working with grief. And today we're going to be talking about how you can help the bereaved really, well, as you say, you dissolve grief, you dissolve depression, you dissolve all sorts of energy, cognitive pain, physical, mental, emotional, that type of thing. So this is going to be a very interesting, conversation for those of you who either already do believe in this type of healing, and those of you who are curious. You're going to get to learn all about that today from Ellie explaining her unique technique that she developed. The Ellie Pechet technique. And we're going to learn all about that right away here, Ellie, because I'm quite curious about how it actually works. And the other thing I just really wanted to say is that you coming from a traditional counseling background, I explained in your introduction that you did start out in traditional talk therapy, yes? And then as your gifts developed with these three modalities of Reiki, EMF, and the Yun healing method, you incorporated that, and I gather found that you could offer so much more to people, and that led you to develop your own unique training or healing technique that you now share globally with others around the world. So let's dive in, and you tell us exactly what you want to say about that. If you want to say how it started, anything you want to emphasize what's different in just from your perspective, your experience, just the traditional therapy versus what happens when you started to incorporate these other modalities in.
So talk therapy is really good to a certain extent. And I was in my early 20s when I was in the mainstream counseling field. And I remember one day saying to myself, it's really good to be able to hold the space for clients to talk about, what's most on their mind and maybe do some problem solving. And, but it's basically, holding the space, which is pretty limiting. And I'm all about getting results and getting efficient results for folks so that they're not caught in the loop of, years of counseling discussing the same things over and over again because their lives are moving on. And so it's not like I went from, counseling one day to where I'm at now. It's been a process. It has my abilities and my technique have really built up and gained momentum over the years. And it's about 34 years that I've been honing my skills and abilities. And now I'm really at the top of my, the top of my game, so to speak, for lack of a better word. Um, so my technique is a combination of, the counseling background that I have is helpful in helping me, more quickly recognize issues that people are having and diagnoses, and then I take it much further and I'll tune in, uh, and I'm highly intuitive. So that's a big part of my success is that I'll link up to a much higher level when I'm meeting with the client. And at one point, we'll be dialoguing like the first 15 minutes of their session. And then as we're talking, I'm actually listening on a higher level for what the most important issue is to clear that session for them. And at one point I'll just hear it. I'll hear the actual sentence and then I'll muscle test it. And it's always accurate. I just want to make sure I've got the most important issue to heal for them that session. And then I'll ask the client what number it feels like on a pain scale of 0 to 10. And if it's an emotional issue, then it would be the level of charge. If it's a physical issue or condition that I'm helping them with, it'll be physical pain, the scale as far as their physical pain. And then, I balance them is the next step. I raise their vital life force. And then I have a really unique ability to, when I say clear, I'm able to actually dissolve the issue that has been intuited. And so I don't absorb it. It's not hanging out there. I literally dissolve it. So whether it's a virus, like it's all highly intuitive. I healed a nurse who was dying and giving her husband written instructions for when she passed. And her sister, who was my main client, called me on a Sunday and asked if I could work with her sister and if I thought I could help her. And I said yes. I knew that if I didn't do this, I knew that my client would be going to her funeral. Now, the audience is probably wondering, well, how could you help her if she was in the hospital, right? And she's on the breathing machine and giving her husband her last instructions. Well, I work with a lot of clients' relatives, whether it's their children, a parent, in this case, a sister-in-law, and all I really need, is a picture, the picture of the person that needs the help and the main symptoms. And then I work using the picture. So when I did the double session with her sister-in-law, when she had x-rays taken earlier that day of her lungs were full of gray matter. And after I did the double session with her the next morning, she got up and they took the x-rays again and they were completely clear. And she was released from the hospital, good to go. She was fine.
So, just for the audience, you can read more testimonials from your clients, Ellie, on your website, phoenixrisinghealing.com. And I did take a look at some of those testimonials. Now, I want to ask you a couple things. One, does that sort of what people would consider miracle healing. They would really. Most people would consider that's a miracle. Can you explain a little bit about that? Like why some people are gifted to be able to do these types of healing, yourself included, on others? Where does that come from?
I would say that the healings that I do for my clients are miracle healings. And in fact, on my brochure of many years now, um, the at the top it says expect a miracle, and that's what I do for my clients. So in answer to your question about uh, healing and ability, everyone comes in with different abilities and different gifts. And I didn't go looking for this. I came in, I had an intention to fulfill my mission while I'm here this time around. And I've been a healer in many past lifetimes. And so I've honed and honed those skills over lifetimes. And in this life, again, for the last few decades plus 30, I'd say 34 years now, I've been once again honing my abilities and making my work as efficient and effective as possible. And I have highly developed intuitive skills and highly developed energetic healing skills. So when I work with my clients, I literally send the energy with my hand. I set the intention, I send the energy with my hand, and I have my whole technique, which is a process that I go through, and the energy goes in like a laser. A big part of why my technique is as successful as it is because a lot of issues, most issues, get stuck in the neural pathways, which are in the brain. And so like a old-fashioned record, which apparently they're coming back, if there's a little nick in the record, then the needle gets stuck and it just keeps going around and around. And it's no different, you know, when you think about our neural pathways. That's where traumas and depression, abandonment, loss, grief get stuck, is in the neural pathways. And it's I'm able to literally dissolve the issue in the neural pathway, and then I also and then I continue and dissolve it in the rest of the energy field, the 7 main chakras. And that's why it only takes one session per core emotional issue, is because well, actually, I clear it in this life, and then I clear it in any past lifetime. So I, I literally dissolve the pattern that most issues that people come in with have been experienced in past lifetimes. So I clear it in this life and then any past lifetimes, and that's why I'm able to do something really big every session. So whether it's an issue with like a chronic issue with a sibling or a parent or a child, um, my favorite thing to do is bring my clients to peace about that which has been troubling them, because as we both know, life is short, and I really want to get people to their purpose for being here. And so they might already know what their purpose is. Some do, some don't, but like by clearing the issues, they're able to step more fully into it, free and unencumbered. And that's what I love doing, is helping people really just get closer to what it is that they came here to do, and live a life that's filled with joy and peace and relaxation, and the ability to open their hearts to give and receive love. And I'm here to help. I'm here to help, and
Yeah.
and that's That's what I do.
I wanted to just jump in. So I think from my perspective, I think for those of us yearning to know why we're here, and then throw in pain, which I think everybody experiences, quite frankly, at some point in their life. But, really difficult loss. I think having, this ability to tie lives together and purpose from those lives is very helpful to healing. I just went through that several months ago. And so in my own journey, even though I've had my own work with angels, and once I was able to have someone who didn't know me and is very gifted in the work that she does, put it together why I'm here, it changed everything for me. But I also think we need to be ready to receive sometimes the information and know what to do with it. I was ready. And as I said to you before we began recording, Ellie, I'm 20 years on July 26th as a bereaved mom. And I'm of the pretty firm belief that any really difficult pain can destroy us and keep us destroyed unless we do something about it. So my question to you is, do you believe that people need to, in order to reach out for help, for healing, that that they need to take, something is driving them to take that first step to want to be healed? Or, I mean, in other words, I think I'm asking, can healing be done for people who are resistant to it? Or have you ever encountered that?
Well, let me ponder that for a moment.
So that might be in a situation, for example, where a relative or a spouse or friend or somebody really wanted healing for a loved one, but they really aren't receptive to it. Have you ever had that kind of a request? So, I mean, do you have to have the permission of the person you're healing to receive the healing?
Well, that is a good question. The way that I navigate that, Vaughn, is I ask the higher self for permission, and the higher self always wants what's best for the person, right?
I do agree.
And a lot of times, um, you know, I just started working with a couple recently, and she's really on board. She's very, familiar with metaphysics and energy work, and very spiritual. And her boyfriend is, just to kind of pull him along. He doesn't understand, the metaphysical world, and yet he's in a lot of pain. And I did his first session last week, and part of the confusion with him was that he had a lot of negative entities. And that's where the shaman branch of the work I do comes in. So if a person, and they're pretty common, I'd say a lot or most people have one or more negative energies that are influencing them, whether they're aware of it or not. And so that's always the first thing that needs to be done. Otherwise, the negative energies or entities will sabotage the work that I try to do with the person. So again, I'm always doing what is going to make my work as efficient as possible. So I might remove the entities in the first session, and then I'll recheck the second session. Again, if it's someone who's resistant or doesn't understand, or say it's a child who doesn't have the attention span, I'm working with their picture. And if they had entities in their first session, I'll check and make sure that they haven't picked up anything new, that there aren't any entities. And when they're clear, then I can start clearing the traumas or the grief or the depression. Someone reached out to me today whose 11-year-old is being bullied and thinking about, committing suicide. So I'm really eager to work with with her and her daughter, and get her daughter past that, definitely past that. So, and I'll do it.
So basically, do you think that? Well, I want to turn to energy for just a little bit because I know there's a lot of people, or in my world. You live in your world. I'm in my world, and a lot of the work I used to do. I spent 10 years working as an angel healing practitioner, doing channeling. Yeah, doing channelings, and I gave it up in 2015, and for various reasons. But once you channel, you can channel, and work with all those entities, and so the divine, and as an aside, well, I do have the mediumship ability. I don't care for working in that. The energy's too low for me, so I don't like it, like just for me. And the other reason I didn't, I did study a little bit under James von Prague, and you're put to work and you just do it. And so it turned out I was pretty good. But for me, and also I felt that my bereavement had put me in such a state of vulnerability. I didn't want to open myself up to naughty little beings, should they come and harass me, which a couple of times that happened. And so I stuck with the angelic realm, and I've worked with them every day ever since. So I just love that. I get what you're saying, and, I know that. So, but my point is, I think there are a lot of people that want to be, as you said, what is it? Your statement was healing leads to freedom. And I think that you state that in your website, part of your materials. And I believe that as well. Healing leads us to such great freedom, and it leads us to live the magnificent lives we want to live, even if that is very calm and quiet and, unassuming and all of the rest of it. We don't have to be these grand people. Folks, listen to me. We're so ingrained that creating a magical life, the life you really want, in many ways is represented by physical wealth and manifestations. It is not. For me, it is all about how peaceful and balanced and genuine we can feel within and with ourselves. And that just changes the picture. So you can live any way you want and be blessed with a blissful life if what you're doing brings you great passion. My new thing is I have to be excited by what I do with everything throughout my day, which might sound like a lot, but hey, if I'm excited to have that cup of tea, that's getting the senses going. So that is what currently drives me as I go through yet another transformation in my life. It used to be what would bring me joy. Right now, it's what brings me, joy and excitement kind of go together. But it's thinking, it's being very present. And so, Ellie, I would think that you would agree that I'm going to ask you. So I'm gonna go, and I'm gonna trust you can create miracle healings, and then probably more. I don't know how to say this, but perhaps other healings that take a little bit of time, right? So if I read on your in your materials correctly, some things take a little longer than one session to be perfectly healed, right? Do you want to speak to that a bit?
Yeah, well, that's true for physical symptoms and conditions, because usually physical conditions are, kind of the result of, well, they'll start out emotional, right? So, for example, if someone has experienced heartache, through grief or some other type of loss with one or more people, then it's going to have an effect on the heart, and the effect starts out energetically, and then if it isn't uh, healed or really dealt with, that energy it'll manifest physically as a heart condition.
Right.
And so I work with that quite a bit. And another example is cancer doesn't just sort of happen out of thin air. Cancer is often, in my many years of experience, it's often the result of deeply held resentments toward one or more people, often, one parent, sometimes both parents. And, it's an anger and resentment that are not expressed, that are held within, that cause the cells to become cancer cells and eventually take over. So when I work with someone with cancer, that's always where I start, is the emotional issues that I intuit led to the development and the manifestation of cancer. And as I'm working with clients that are dealing with cancer, as I'm clearing the emotional issues that are connected to it, the cancer starts to actually really slow down and eventually back up, like it goes into regression. And I've done this a number of times. So I would say that's pretty miraculous. For so many people, they hear the word cancer and it feels like, and it can be a death sentence, but it doesn't have to be.
And there are a lot of younger people. I don't know what's happening in the States, but in Canada, they've actually got it where younger people are developing. And when I say younger, we're talking mostly 40s, 50s, but it could be younger in the 30s and even younger, but to the point it's almost surpassing. I don't want to say it is for sure, but certainly equal. To the older generation, so where they've prepared and they have all of these, tests and the ability to treat cancer that they expect in an older population. For the younger generation, it's taking the medical community off guard, and boom, and so in some cases the cancer is being developed at late stages. And so here's a question. Do you think that a person being diagnosed with anything, or even loss, because we're going to turn to that, that they have to have the will and the desire at even a very innate and sometimes subconscious level to want to be cured, healed, and nothing coming back? You mean so cured?
Yes, and I think it really helps if they want to go a little deeper, or maybe a lot deeper, and explore, how did this develop? What happened? Who is it that I'm feeling really upset with and resentful about? And those types of questions are very helpful in uh, just doing self-exploration. And um, when I start working with a client, I have several forms that I email them, and they fill out and send back to me. And one of the forms is the counseling form, which is, emotional issues that they've experienced, like grief or trauma or depression. And it's when they fill these forms out, it's very helpful in making my work with them more efficient, because then I start tuning into, is it this issue? Is it that issue? Is it resentment toward the mother or the father? Now, I do want to, there is a caveat when it comes to cancer. Um, it depends what stage it's at when I start working with them. If it's really advanced and if it's metastasized, then I can help them come to peace, with their life. But I'm not necessarily, if it's beyond a certain point, um, I'm not necessarily able to heal that, but I can help them come to peace. But cancer, when someone gets a diagnosis of cancer, there's a window for them to really get the help that I can give if they want to heal it. And cancer doesn't wait. It keeps marching on. So if someone has cancer, the best thing is to, reach out and kind of nip it in the bud. And uh, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I'm careful. with what I talk about to any length of degree on a recorded episode, because there's many restrictions now that you can't talk about this and can't talk about that on YouTube and stuff like that. So I don't quite know what all the conditions are. So I'm always, when I frame things, I talk a little bit. I try to talk a little bit about things more in general. But having said that, I see all disease in my mind almost like just being balls of just wrapped up tangles and tangles of toxic energy. You want to speak to what disease really maybe looks like in your mind? What you see, is it sort of universal across the board? Do some diseases have different types of energy? But ultimately, in answer to this, is it toxic energy? So does all disease and illness come from some kind of toxic energy within our bodies?
I would say that the energy becomes toxic. Um, but I think of it more in terms of, unresolved issues, either from a current situation or a past situation, or a number of past issues that are just building up in the body and in the energy field. And eventually the body says, I can't do this anymore. It's challenging enough just to, stay healthy. And that's why I always start with clearing the emotional issues, because they drain the person emotionally and physically. And eventually it will catch up to them, or it often catches up to them. It's just what happens.
Yeah, so I think what I'm trying to get at is, for the person who this might be just all new to them, and they don't even think of themselves as an energetic being. Hence, you'll have millions of people who get sick and are dealing strictly with the physical. And basically, if I hear you right, you're saying essentially deal with the emotional, deal with the energy part of it, and then the physical will respond to that in many ways. That's not saying, audience, that you don't need medical treatment and see your doctor and all of that, but it's almost like working in tandem. So if you are very intuitive and aligned with your inner self, don't you think this can go a long way to preserving a healthy body and getting yourself back to health when we may slip up and, we'll get stuff, that nuisance illnesses like I get. But as much as I want to throw this in, so try not to lose that train of thought, and I'll try not to. For many years, I wanted the doctors to tell me I had a bad heart. Yes, my bereavement had destroyed my physical body, but it didn't. I'm as healthy as you can be. And so despite the little nuisance illnesses I get, they're for me to stop, slow down, rebalance, rethink, all of that. And I know that. But it was interesting, and especially in my early years, I'd say the first 10 maybe, 7 to 10, I really wanted them to find that grief was so bad. Look, it's destroying me. But they just never found anything, ever, with symptoms I had. Stress, they were stress symptoms and stuff, but they couldn't even really diagnose it as that. But I was always very in tune, because ironically, I happened to start working with the angels 9 months before my daughter died. So by the time she did die, which was, she took her own life, while the angels protected me. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. And they've been on that path with me for 20 years. But understanding that a lot of people are probably, from my experience, right, aren't really in tune with their bodies that much. They're not really in tune with themselves as an energy field, although I think this is growing, and I think the younger generations are smarter than maybe I was in my younger years, even though I started this back in the 80s. Right? I think that the younger generations are much more in tune with themselves as energetic beings and a spiritual practice, and hopefully it's growing. And they seem pretty darn smart. And I have, yes, a millennial son. So I just know I'm around millennials. You guys have it together, like pretty fast. Anyway, what's your take on that? Do you think that more people like that you have to, no, not have to, that it is of benefit to be sort of in tune with yourself as an energetic being to keep yourself healthy or healed from something?
Absolutely. I mean, the more self-awareness we have, the more we can stay on top of things that come up, challenges that come up. And, you mentioned about wanting at one point wanting the doctors to say that, that that you had developed a heart condition. And I'm just wondering, were you wanting them to validate how much pain you had been in? And I'm also wondering if there was maybe some guilt there that you wanted them to validate your suffering for all that time about your daughter. Do you think?
Well, I know that in the world of bereaved parents, it's a very lonely place to be. And there are millions of us out there, and that's the irony. We don't talk a lot about it. And of course, suicide is something that also is still very hush hush. And there is an absolute shame associated with it. And yes, so I absolutely agree with you, but I didn't know it at the time. I just wanted some kind of physical proof that what I was going through mentally and emotionally surely could be seen in the physical. You see, that's my proof, because that's how we validate things in this culture.
Right.
We can see you have a problem if you can show it to me physically, how it's manifesting. You see? And so, but it took me years to understand that. Really.
You got there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You don't need you matured to the point where you didn't need the validation of your pain because you were able to heal it, and that's so important.
Mm-hmm.
So important.
So my question is, so for the person who comes to you, or anyone for that matter, for work in the in the areas that we medical science maybe can't prove these healings, okay? Maybe they can, maybe they can't, but they're coming to healers for this very important work on the self, for the energy, for the emotional piece, which I believe that we need a ton more work in the emotional healing. So what do they have to do? You say that you give people the ability to live a fulfilled and empowered life. And so I just want to ask you, is there come a point where they may regress into these same issues that you've healed, or someone else maybe has healed, if they don't do an overall sort of an overhaul of themselves, pay attention to the inside, to keep them on track? In other words, do they think they're going to come for a miracle healing and then go back to the way they were living and they're just going to be forever healed? That's the real question.
Well, each issue that I heal for my clients is pretty permanent. It doesn't come back. It doesn't come up again. And uh, you know, every time I work with someone, it gives them the ability to live their life more on purpose and free of one more burden. Every session I clear a burden that they've been carrying. So they don't, what's unique about the way that I work is because I'm able to dissolve a big issue every session, it's one less thing for them to have to deal with. And it's one more step closer to the freedom that everyone wants.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We all want. Well, I'd be hard pressed to understand why anyone did not want to live a really wonderful, peaceful, beautiful life free of all pain and suffering. No matter what life throws at you. That's a good piece of the work that I do, taken in very small steps from, very beginning places. But moving on just a little bit here, do you I know you wanted to give a couple of examples. We have time for a couple examples, and you wanted to talk about bereavement. So, do you want to share a couple of stories quickly about the people you've helped that have lost their children? So, anyone watching this that maybe is in pain from losing a child, their only child, one of a few children, but you love them like they were your only child, but you still have room in your heart for your surviving child or children, or some other loss that's really taken them to a dark place. How has this healing worked, Ellie, on if you want to share a couple stories like that for our folks listening or watching?
Well, one woman that heard me speak at the Afterlife conference in Scottsdale a few years ago, her son, her only child was her son, and he was murdered his first year in college. And so she was so devastated that she completely shut down for the next 7 years and tried all kinds of things, modalities, talking, support groups. Nothing helped. She was still completely shut down until she met me she heard me speak at the Afterlife conference, and then she felt the energy that I heal with at a workshop that I did after my speech. And she just knew innately that that I could help her and that she needed to sign up. So she signed up for 4 sessions. And in her very first session, I brought her to peace about the son that she had lost. And this is after 7 years of suffering. Literally one session, she was at peace about her loss of him, and she was able to really just not only feel at peace, but think about the positive memories and the connection that they had and will always have. And she was able to move forward with her life again. And that is one of the video testimonials on my website. On the testimonials page, I would recommend that if people are, interested in learning more, that they go to the testimonials page, and she gives a beautiful, very articulate testimonial about how I helped her. And that's what I do for my clients. I bring them to peace about whatever is tormenting them, whatever is bothering them, and keeping them from living a life of joy and happiness and freedom. So that's one example. Another example is a client her daughter was murdered, and she was in a place of grief for a number of years, again, until she met me. And by then she had developed a chronic lung infection, and grief is stored in the lungs. And so, you know, that's when I healed her grief over her daughter being taken from her. The the lung infection actually cleared up by about 50% that session, and then in a subsequent session, I healed the rest of the lung infection. So that's the emotional connection to the physical manifestation of a lot of issues and symptoms. So
I was just going to say I did see your testimonials, and that's great. I So you also we didn't really focus a lot on grief because I just in the sense of like just you have to have a certain loss to feel this or that, because I've really I just come to understand that grief is associated to so many things in our life. And I would say, not to contradict you, but I would say grief lives in a heck of a lot of places in our body. And I remember when I first started getting massages and things like that, and I had a whole bunch of stuff stored up in my butt, and the lower abdomen and all of these different places, which was very significant. Just it's there's no one size fits all from my world and my perspective, but it is, the grief can permeate you in all ways, areas that stump doctors, I'll tell you that. And so, audience, whether or not you are ready for some energy healing, some energy work, are already in it. I think that I want to think, I can't say this for a fact, but I'll invite my listeners and viewers to consider, if you are in horrendous pain and horrendous grief from losing your child, or I've recently met people losing their spouse that, is affecting them in the way that, losing my child might have affected me. I think we're given what in this life, what we can bear. I really do believe that. And for some people, they can respond to losing a pet with complete and utter breakdown, because that's what they had in their life. So we're not talking here about you have to have experienced loss of your child to experience symptoms that Ellie can, dissolve for you, that you can, at least if you're not ready to take that step, consider looking within and taking a small step to discovering yourself, exploring within, and seeing where this emotional hurt, is blocking you. Because I really do believe that it's, like you said, that it starts with the emotional, moves, into the mental, and then into the physical. And there were some medical doctors, Deepak Chopra, in his very, very early career, in his 70s maybe, I got one of his first books, Creating Health, speaks about this as a cardiologist, like the heart conditions started somewhere else as another form of energy. So the message I want to say to the audience here is that if you're so lucky to, be able to connect with someone that can help you, with some healing in another, type of healing, whatever you can start with is a really good solid step to want to be fully healed. Because the other piece of this, Ellie, and I don't know if you see it or you don't see it, but I can sure tell you, I've met an awful lot of people, myself included, for a number of years, like there's a real contradiction over wanting to be healed, especially when you've lost your child, because that pain keeps us to them. And so especially difficult for people who aren't lucky enough to communicate with their child in the afterlife. And I was, right from the first hours. My daughter Janaea came to me and has come to me in even physical manifestations. Not so often, but they don't need, but there like anymore, but they were a lot in the first several years. So I had all that proof I needed. She's alive somewhere in some form. We're communicating. I had the angels. So I had a lot of that going for me. However, I still struggled with many, 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 many things. So it's you have to be in a position, in a mental frame where you want to, that it's safe to be healed. Because for a number of years I would say, well, if I'm willing to let this go, and maybe not grief in its entirety, that's a personal choice, I think, for what people are looking for. What are you going to fill that space with? And I started contemplating that maybe about 5 years ago, actually, when I wrote my last book. And which was basically lessons from surviving suicide. And it was written as a letter to my daughter and all the things that I wished I had known when she had passed, and to help other newly bereaved parents. And I really, really did understand that when we create a space in our heart for something more through the healing, even in our mind, for me, it was very important. I knew what I was going to replace it with, because I wasn't yet ready to see a life of joy and all of that stuff. Okay, that without very heavy bereavement is very difficult, and also PTSD. You talk about being able to treat PTSD this way. So that's a big piece of it. That it's very hard to imagine your future when your brain is not connecting the right way. Do you want to speak? Do you want to speak to anything like about that?
Yeah. Well, I would say that a lot of parents who lose their child to suicide, it's very common for them to feel and guilt and remorse and shame sometimes, and wondering what they could have done, what they missed, what they might have missed. Uh, and so, when I'm working with a parent who has lost a child, um, we talk about it a little bit, and then I clear the guilt or the shame or whatever it is that they're experiencing, and again, literally dissolve it so that, every time I work with them. So the first session, I might heal their grief. And then the next session, if they have shame or guilt, whatever it is, regret about not being able to, you know, uh, be with their child physically as they, live the rest of their life. So whatever the top issue is, I clear it in the subsequent sessions, and my work is really built around um, the goal and the mission of bringing them to peace, bringing the people that I work with to peace, because uh, living a life with a lot of upset and emotional charge it's not living.
It certainly isn't. So God bless you, Ellie. I didn't have you in the beginning, and I did search. I did search in the first few years for anything that helped. So I had a lot of people that were mediums, that, angel channelers, that brought her to me. And my number one thing was, and this is true for a parent, it doesn't matter how your child died. Honestly, we're all the same. I've met enough of you parents over the years. If you're watching, listening, and to Ellie, I've met enough bereaved parents to know we don't even talk about how our child has died. It's just we're all in this same boat. And it feels like, you're just drowning, as you probably know from meeting a lot of people. And so and I met a lot of people that at the time that I became bereaved were years into their bereavement, and it was destroying them. And so I made the decision immediately, within a month, that was not going to be me. I was going to find every way I could to survive this suffering. But then I've had a lot of purpose work related to understanding suffering, which has made me, deal with it for a little longer than maybe I wanted to. But to go on a very, very authentic journey within myself to let the transformation happen as it was going to happen, and continues to this day. So that's my journey. But I've seen enough people who are not in touch. They're just left with this physical manifestation, this blob of grief, and just don't know what to do with it. So, and I know a lot of people are very desperate to know that their child is safe, again, no matter how they died. And so that's a big piece of it. But then also the self-care, and to not feel guilty about wanting to be healed, people, because you deserve a good life. You really do. And there's a lot of guilt associated as a bereaved parent, and maybe others in bereavement, to enjoying yourself. Okay, for just a lot of reasons. So there is that piece to it. So if you are ready to experience some healing and want to know more, I know that, well, let me confirm that people can sign up for free consultation at your website, phoenixrisinghealing.com.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. If you're interested more in what Ellie can, introduce you to, check that out, a free consultation at phoenixrisinghealing.com. There, I said that pretty great in one mouthful, Ellie. And we covered some things. I don't know that we talked a ton about everything we wanted to, but I think I know you do global remote healing, and people can find out about that on the site, things like that. I know I wanted to give a nod to your book, Hitching a Ride, A Guide to Earthbound Spirits and How They Affect You. Again, Ellie, you are in this work, and that's a whole other topic, right? But they can explore your website, get your book. We'll have a link to your website where they can find all these things if you're interested in finding out more about that kind of energy experience. Hey, Ellie? I think you've given us a very clear idea about how you can help people. Do you have any final thoughts you want to leave our audience with if they're ready for something more, how to create space in their life? Does your dissolving of, grief, depression, we didn't even get a chance to really talk about depression because we could just go on and on and on. But anything, let's just say anything toxic within us that you can dissolve, right? What do they have to do to ensure space is created for them to want the goodness that they can create and invite into their life?
Well, they need to be open to, to wanting to feel better. There's free will, right? So I usually the people who come to me really want to feel better, are struggling, are in pain, and whether it's, traumas that they're carrying or grief that they're holding, or I can clear someone's lifelong depression if someone has been dealing with and struggling with depression their whole life. I can often clear that in one session. So I'm really about, getting to the root of the issue and taking care of something really big every session. And it's important to me to be as efficient as I can so that clients do not become, dependent on me. It's not about becoming dependent on me or being with me for years, like with traditional therapy. A lot of therapists, they get on that hamster wheel and they just stay on the hamster wheel. I'm about clearing a core issue every session, and so that they can really start enjoying their life and their purpose for being here. It's mostly to get them out of pain and feeling good again. So all they have to do is show up and be willing to feel better, and then I do the heavy lifting and take care of the issues.
I love that. I saw like a door opening and just walk through the door. On a last note, I did want to ask you though, depression. And I haven't had that myself, but I certainly do know of people that struggle. Can you just share where you believe that depression like comes from? Like you said, grief like rests in our lungs. Well, what is depression doing to our bodies? And, you're right about people going for endless sessions to change meds and, do talk therapy and never get to the root of it. Do you even want to share where you believe depression stems from as a physical like disorder? Yeah.
Yeah, depression often comes from childhood issues, from feeling unwanted, uh, from maybe actually being abandoned emotionally, sometimes physically also, um, not feeling worthy, having parents that, caused them to feel like they weren't that important. And, that's what I find where I find depression often stems from is childhood issues and not feeling cherished as a child or loved or worthy or valuable.
Wow.
And so, yeah.
Okay, so the reason that's just a nod to anybody watching here who is also struggling with depression. So anything really in closing, Ellie, I'm getting from our conversation that, I felt for years anyways, but for the newbies out there, the curious, that look within, start within. And, listen, if you get even a little bit curious about yourself, I think we just want to heal the things that are burdensome to us. And it's really interesting because I grew up with a very, very, very ill mom, but today we would describe her as having postpartum depression, but it didn't exist in the 50s, that term. And she really, really struggled. So it created a lot of dysfunction, with many suicide attempts that she had when I was, to the age of 10. And so that wasn't the thing that ended up, creating the trauma in my life, right? You'd think it was, but it wasn't. It was when my daughter actually ended up taking her life that was it. And I did get PTSD. and learned how to manage it. Could I heal it? Sure. Do I want to? Not sure I want to do anything right now. So I'm just sitting with what I'm going through, because I'm so much better than I was. So I also want to offer hope to people out there. I don't think it's so much necessarily about the time that we're in grief, but I do know that the years, as they add up to how long we've had something we're living with as a traumatic experience, they do change as long as we do something with the experience. So I'm a firm believer, and we get to choose what we want to do with our experience. And if we want to wallow in pain and suffering, we can do that. If you want to heal, you can do that too. We can do that too. And so I just want to throw that out there as a little plug. So whatever it is, and one type of suffering can certainly produce other types of suffering, as I'm sure you will attest to, Ellie. So a lot of what you treat in chronic pain, I mean, all of the things that you treat, I'm going, wow, yeah, you could definitely have all of these things just from one loss or traumatic experience. So I think it's about being aware. How would you like to close this episode off, Ellie? What would you like to leave our audience with as maybe a key remembrance statement, whatever?
Yeah, well, my message to the audience would be, know that you are worthy, you are valuable, you are special, and you deserve to live a life that is happy and free and where you're feeling inner peace all the time. That's really what we're here to come to. We might have lessons, a lot of lessons along the way, but my work is about helping you understand what the lessons are and heal the pain. You don't have to keep carrying the pain around with you or the emotional charge. You can just, if I work with you, you will have peace and you'll know what the lessons are, but you won't be in pain anymore.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. That's awesome. You are worthy of love, and start with loving yourself. Once you love yourself, you open the door to receive it from others and give it out more genuinely to others as well. Okay, well, there's so much that we could continue to talk about, Ellie, but I think that's going to wrap it up for today at the top of the hour. So I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing with my audience. Check out Ellie's website, phoenixrisinghealing.com, and see what you want to explore there, either her free consultation or anything else that you may be interested in. I'll have links in the show notes. So thank you again, Ellie.
Yes, thanks for having me on. Good to be with you.
Absolutely.